Ambassador Zethkar's crystalline claws scraped against the polished metal of the conference table as he read the declaration one final time. The document bore the seals of 12 galactic civilizations, each one representing billions of souls united in their decision. The Vorthak Empire, the Selenian Confederacy, the hive minds of Kepler 442b, and 9 other major powers had signed their names to what would become known as the most catastrophic miscalculation in galactic history. The Terran Isolation Treaty is hereby declared null and void, Zethkar announced to the assembled representatives. His voice carried the weight of 3 millennia of careful diplomacy now crumbling to dust. Effective immediately, all human settlements, colonies, and territories are considered hostile enemy positions. The decision had not been made lightly. For 3,000 years, the galaxy had lived under an uneasy truce with humanity. The humans had been contained to their small corner of the Orion Arm, forbidden from expanding beyond a carefully defined boundary that encompassed roughly 200 star systems. In exchange, the rest of the galaxy had agreed to leave them alone, trading with them through heavily regulated neutral zones and treating them as a quarantined but tolerated neighbor. But times had changed. Resources were running low across the galaxy. Ancient trade routes had dried up as civilizations expanded beyond their sustainable limits. The carefully maintained balance of power that had kept peace for millennia was beginning to fracture. The humans, with their rich worlds and untapped resources, had become too tempting a target to ignore any longer. Commander Veltara of the Vorthak Imperial Fleet had been among the most vocal advocates for breaking the treaty. Her species had evolved from predatory pack hunters, and their military doctrine reflected that heritage. The humans are weak, she had argued before the Galactic Council. They have grown soft during their isolation. 3,000 years of peace have made them complacent. They have no real military to speak of, no advanced weapons, no defensive capabilities that could threaten a coordinated assault from the 12 greatest powers in the galaxy. The intelligence report seemed to support her assessment. Human technological development had stagnated centuries ago, while the rest of the galaxy had advanced in leaps and bounds, developing faster-than-light communication, energy shields, and antimatter weapons. The humans appeared content to putter around their little corner of space with outdated fusion drives and primitive kinetic weapons. Their largest military vessels were barely the size of a modern galactic patrol ship. What the assembled alien leaders didn't know was that their intelligence was 300 years out of date. The humans had learned long ago that being underestimated was often more valuable than being feared. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, in a facility that existed in no official records, Admiral Sarah Chen reviewed the same intelligence reports that had convinced the aliens to declare war. She allowed herself a small smile as she read Commander Veltara's assessment of human military capabilities. The Vorthak commander wasn't entirely wrong. The humans had indeed grown soft in some ways. But she had fundamentally misunderstood what 3,000 years of enforced isolation had actually accomplished. "Status report," Chen commanded as she entered the Central Command Center, a vast underground complex that stretched for kilometers beneath the moon's surface. "All fleets are at maximum readiness," reported Captain Morrison, a young officer whose grandmother had been born before the last galactic conflict ended. "The Prometheus Initiative vessels are standing by. Deep space monitoring has confirmed that the alien fleets are beginning to mobilize. Estimated time to first contact is 72 hours. Chen nodded calmly. 72 hours. After 3 millennia of preparation, it all came down to 3 days. She walked over to the massive holographic display that dominated the center of the room, showing a 3-dimensional map of human space and the surrounding regions. Red markers indicated the positions of alien fleet concentrations. Blue markers showed human defensive positions and fleet deployments. To any observer, it would appear that humanity was hopelessly outnumbered. The aliens had approximately 40,000 warships of various classes preparing for the assault. The humans appeared to have fewer than 3,000 vessels in their entire space navy. It looked like a massacre waiting to happen. "Ma'am," called out Lieutenant Rodriguez from her station at the communications console, "we're receiving the formal declaration of war through diplomatic channels. They're demanding complete and unconditional surrender of all human territories within 48 hours. "Standard response," Chen replied without taking her eyes off the tactical display. "Acknowledge receipt and inform them that humanity will respond in due time." What the aliens couldn't see from their distant observation posts were the installations that had been built over the past 3 centuries. Hidden within asteroids, concealed on the dark sides of moons, and buried deep beneath the surfaces of seemingly uninhabited worlds, humanity had been busy. The isolation treaty had forbidden them from expanding their territory, but it had said nothing about improving their defensive capabilities within that territory. Project Looking Glass had been humanity's answer to their technological disadvantage. Unable to match the aliens in raw firepower or faster-than-light travel, human scientists had focused on areas where their species seemed to have natural advantages: adaptability, creativity, and an almost pathological refusal to give up when faced with impossible odds. Dr. Elizabeth Hawking, the current director of the Prometheus Initiative, entered the command center carrying a tablet filled with reports from research stations across human space. Her great-great-grandmother had been one of the original architects of humanity's isolation strategy, and she had inherited both the woman's brilliant mind and her determination to see humanity survive against impossible odds. "The quantum entanglement network is fully operational," she reported to Admiral Chen. "All defense platforms are linked and ready for coordinated response. The new energy projection systems are operating at 97% efficiency, and the Special Projects team has completed the final modifications to the Lazarus array." Chen turned to look at the scientist, her expression serious. "Are we really ready for this, Elizabeth? 3,000 years of preparation, and it all comes down to whether our theories actually work in practice." Dr. Hawking's smile was reminiscent of her famous ancestors' confidence in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. "Admiral, the math is solid. The simulations have been run millions of times. Every variable has been accounted for. The aliens think they're about to crush a primitive civilization that's been trapped in technological stagnation for 3 millennia. She paused, looking up at the tactical display where red markers continued to multiply as more alien fleets joined the assault force. "They're about to learn that isolation and stagnation are not the same thing." Across human space, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of worlds. On Mars, the vast underground industrial complexes that had been disguised as mining operations for centuries were revealing their true purpose. On Europa, beneath kilometers of ice, submarine fleets that officially didn't exist were rising toward the surface. In the asteroid belt, navigation hazards that had been carefully maintained for hundreds of years were beginning to move with purpose and coordination. The aliens had made their intelligence estimates based on what they could observe from outside human space. They had counted the ships they could see, cataloged the weapons they could detect, and assessed the technological capabilities they could measure. What they had failed to consider was that a species trapped in a box for 3,000 years might have learned to think very creatively about the contents of that box. On Terra Nova, one of humanity's furthest frontier worlds, Governor Marcus Webb stood on his balcony overlooking New Geneva, the planet's capital city. The city looked peaceful in the setting sun, its towers and gardens giving no hint of the military installations hidden beneath every major structure. Webb had spent his entire life on this world, born into the 3rd generation of colonists who had known from childhood that someday this moment would come. His personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. It was brief and to the point. 48 hours to first contact. Operation Homecoming is authorized. Show them what humanity has learned." Webb smiled as he watched the sun set over his world. In 48 hours, 12 alien civilizations were going to discover that the past 3,000 years hadn't been a time of human stagnation and decline. They had been the longest military preparation period in galactic history. The humans had been waiting, and now, finally, they were ready to remind the galaxy why their species had been considered dangerous enough to isolate in the first place. Commander Veltara stood on the bridge of the Vorthak flagship, Endless Fury, watching the tactical display with satisfaction as the combined alien armada approached the outer edge of human space. 40,000 vessels from 12 different civilizations moved in perfect coordination, their formations stretching across several light-years of space. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, and it was about to crush what intelligence reports suggested was a primitive, isolated civilization. "Energy signatures detected," announced her tactical officer, a young Vorthak warrior eager to prove himself in what everyone expected to be a very brief campaign. "Multiple human vessels approaching from the direction of their outer colonies." Veltara's mandibles clicked with amusement as the human fleet appeared on her screens. Roughly 200 ships, moving in loose formation with what appeared to be outdated fusion drives. Their largest vessel was barely half the size of a standard Vorthak destroyer. This was going to be even easier than she had anticipated. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. "Let's give these primitives one last chance to surrender before we demonstrate the futility of resistance." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a human in what appeared to be a naval uniform. The being looked remarkably unremarkable. No natural armor, no visible weapons, no intimidating physical features that would suggest a warrior species. Commander Veltara had seen more threatening creatures in her homeworld's petting zoos. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force," the human said calmly. "You are currently in violation of the Terran Isolation Treaty and are trespassing in human sovereign space. You have 30 minutes to withdraw your forces before we take appropriate defensive action." The bridge of the Endless Fury erupted in what could only be described as surprised laughter. Veltara's own amusement was so intense that her natural predator's growl became almost musical. "Admiral Chen," she said, struggling to control her mirth, "you appear to be under the impression that your treaty still exists. Allow me to clarify the situation. 40,000 warships representing the 12 most powerful civilizations in the galaxy are currently preparing to occupy your space. You have 200 primitive vessels that our preliminary scans indicate are armed with kinetic projectiles and fusion warheads." She paused to let the mathematics sink in. "Surrender now, and your species will be allowed to survive as a protectorate. Resist, and your worlds will be reduced to asteroid fields." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. If anything, she looked slightly bored by the conversation. "Commander, I appreciate the warning, but I'm afraid you've made a fundamental error in your calculations. You're assuming that what you can see represents the totality of human defensive capabilities." Before Veltara could respond, her tactical officer's voice cut through the bridge chatter with sudden urgency. "Commander, energy spikes detected throughout human space. Massive signatures, far beyond anything in our intelligence reports. I'm reading. This can't be correct." "What are you seeing?" Veltara demanded, her amusement rapidly turning to concern. "Ma'am, I'm detecting over 50,000 individual energy signatures that match warship profiles. They're everywhere. Asteroid fields, moon bases, hidden behind planets, inside nebulae. How did our scouts miss this many ships?" Admiral Chen's image smiled for the first time. "Because, Commander Veltara, they were never hidden from your scouts. Your intelligence gatherers saw exactly what we wanted them to see. Every scan, every probe, Every surveillance mission over the past 3 centuries has been carefully managed to provide you with accurate but incomplete information. The truth was even more elegant than Chen's explanation suggested. Humanity had indeed allowed alien surveillance of their space, but they had used that surveillance as a weapon. Every alien probe had been detected, tracked, and carefully guided to observe exactly what human strategists wanted observed. The ships the aliens had counted were real. They were the human fleet that existed for the specific purpose of being counted. The actual human military had been built in places where alien sensors couldn't reach and using technologies that alien detection methods couldn't recognize. 3,000 years of isolation had given humanity time to study every alien surveillance method, decode every scanning technology, and develop countermeasures that didn't just hide human capabilities, but actively misdirected alien intelligence gathering. "Impossible," Veltara snarled. "No civilization could hide that level of military buildup for centuries. Our quantum sensors would have detected any significant energy signatures." "Your quantum sensors," Admiral Chen replied, "are indeed impressive technology. Unfortunately for you, they have one significant limitation. They can only detect quantum signatures that match known patterns in your databases. Humanity has spent the past 3 centuries developing quantum technologies that operate on entirely different principles." As if to emphasize her point, the space around the alien armada suddenly erupted with activity. What had appeared to be empty space moments before was now filled with vessels that seemed to materialize out of nothing. They weren't decloaking. They were simply becoming visible as they powered up energy signatures that finally registered on alien sensors. Dr. Elizabeth Hawking, monitoring the engagement from the Prometheus research station buried deep within the Kuiper Belt, watched with satisfaction as 3 millennia of theoretical physics finally got their practical demonstration. The quantum displacement drive had been her grandmother's greatest achievement, a propulsion system that didn't move ships through space but rather moved space around ships. Vessels equipped with QDD didn't travel. They simply ceased to exist in one location and began existing in another. To alien sensors, ships using QDD appeared to be nothing more than naturally occurring quantum fluctuations in space-time. The energy signatures were there, but they matched background cosmic radiation so perfectly that no artificial intelligence or scanning computer would flag them as artificial. It had taken human scientists 3 centuries to develop, but it had allowed them to deploy the largest fleet in galactic history without anyone realizing it existed. "Phase 1 deployment is complete," reported Captain Morrison from the Luna Command Center. "All QDD-equipped vessels are in position. The alien fleet is now completely surrounded." Admiral Chen's voice remained calm as she addressed the increasingly panicked alien commander. "Commander Veltara, you now have 15 minutes to begin withdrawal procedures. I would strongly recommend you take advantage of this opportunity." But Veltara was a Vorthak warrior, descended from apex predators who had never retreated from prey, no matter how dangerous. The idea of withdrawing in the face of opposition was simply not in her species' psychological makeup. "All ships attack formation," she commanded. "Target the primitive vessels first, then move on to these new arrivals. 40,000 ships cannot be defeated by clever tricks and hidden forces. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for centuries." The alien armada, spread across several light-years of space, began their assault with overwhelming force. Energy weapons that could crack planets fired in coordinated volleys, missiles that could destroy moons launched in clouds that darkened space. It was a display of raw power that should have been sufficient to sterilize entire solar systems. The human response was unlike anything in recorded galactic military history. Instead of meeting force with force, the human ships simply weren't there when the alien weapons arrived. QDD technology allowed them to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, flickering in and out of reality so rapidly that targeting them was like trying to shoot raindrops in a thunderstorm. But the truly revolutionary development wasn't the QDD ships. It was what happened when the alien weapons missed their targets and continued traveling through human space. Every blast, every missile, every particle beam that failed to hit a human vessel encountered what appeared to be empty space and continued on its trajectory until it struck something unexpected. "What are those readings?" demanded Veltara, as her weapons officer tried to make sense of the tactical display. "Commander, our weapons are hitting something. Massive structures that weren't there before. I'm reading construction projects the size of small moons." The Lazarus Array was humanity's most ambitious engineering project, a network of gravitational manipulation stations that had been built over the course of 600 years. Each station was capable of generating artificial gravity wells powerful enough to affect the movement of entire fleets. When activated in coordination, they could turn a star system into a weapon. As the alien weapons fire revealed the hidden stations, they began to power up for the first time in their centuries-long existence. Space itself began to twist and bend around the alien fleet, as artificial gravity wells created navigation hazards that shouldn't have been possible. Ships found themselves pulled off course, their formations disrupted, their careful coordination shattered by forces they couldn't understand or counter. "This is impossible!" Veltara roared as her flagship was pulled into a gravity spiral that dragged it away from the battle formation. "Space doesn't behave this way! Physics doesn't work this way!" Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos with infuriating calm. "Commander, you're absolutely correct. This isn't how physics normally works. But humanity has had 3,000 years to study physics, and we've learned some interesting things about the relationship between gravity, space-time, and quantum mechanics. We've essentially turned your invasion fleet into a laboratory for testing our theories." The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted exactly 47 minutes. 40,000 ships representing the most powerful military force in galactic history found themselves scattered across human space, unable to coordinate their movements, unable to target human vessels that flickered in and out of existence, and unable to escape gravitational anomalies that violated everything they understood about how space was supposed to work. When the Lazarus Array finally powered down and the human fleet stopped using their QDD systems to phase in and out of reality, the alien armada found itself completely surrounded, utterly defeated, and forced to confront a truth that would reshape galactic politics forever. Humanity had spent 3,000 years in isolation, not because they were weak, but because they were learning. And now, they were ready to teach the galaxy some very expensive lessons. The Galactic Council Chamber had never seen anything quite like the scene unfolding before the assembled representatives. Commander Veltara, once the proud architect of humanity's destruction, now stood in restraints before the very body she had convinced to break the Terran Isolation Treaty. Her defeat had been so complete, so utterly devastating, that news of it had reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. Ambassador Zethkar, who had read the declaration of war just 3 days earlier, now found himself in the impossible position of trying to negotiate with the species that had just demonstrated they could have conquered the entire galaxy at any time over the past 3 millennia. The crystalline being's usual composure was cracking under the weight of implications that grew more terrifying with each new intelligence report. "The human fleet has taken 40,000 vessels intact," reported General Crixon of the Selenian Confederacy, his normally steady voice trembling with disbelief. "Not destroyed, captured. Every ship, every crew member, every piece of military technology we committed to this campaign is now in human hands, and they did it without firing a single shot." The truth was even more unsettling than the general's report suggested. The human capture of the alien fleet had been accomplished through technology that shouldn't have existed. Gravitational tractor beams that could hold vessels the size of space stations. quantum containment fields that made weapons systems simply stop functioning. Most disturbing of all, boarding parties that appeared inside alien ships without any apparent method of transport, as if they had simply decided to exist in those locations. Admiral Sarah Chen materialized in the center of the council chamber, using the same impossible transportation technology that had allowed human forces to board every vessel in the alien armada simultaneously. The assembled alien representatives flinched backward as she appeared, their various species' fight-or-flight responses triggering at the sight of a being who could apparently ignore the basic laws of physics. "Honored representatives," Chen said with the calm tone of someone discussing the weather, rather than addressing the leaders of civilizations that had just attempted genocide. "I bring greetings from the Terran Federation and an offer of continued peaceful coexistence." The irony was not lost on anyone present. Humanity was offering peace after demonstrating they could have ended every civilization in the galaxy without breaking stride. It was perhaps the most terrifying peace offering in galactic history. "What do you want?" Ambassador Zethkar managed to ask, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns that betrayed his barely controlled terror. Admiral Chen smiled the way a teacher might smile at a student who had finally asked the right question. "What we want, Ambassador, is what we've always wanted. To be left alone, to develop in peace. The difference is that 3,000 years ago, we accepted isolation because we lacked the power to refuse it. Today, we're choosing isolation because we prefer it to the alternatives." Dr. Elizabeth Hawking appeared beside Chen using the same transportation technology, carrying a data tablet that contained information the alien civilizations desperately needed to understand their new reality. "The past 72 hours have been an educational experience for everyone involved," she said, addressing the assembled representatives with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to children. "We've learned that our defensive technologies work even better than our simulations predicted. You've learned that intelligence gathering requires actually understanding what you're observing." The data tablet projected a holographic display that showed the true scope of human space. What the aliens had believed to be 200 star systems with primitive colonies was revealed to be a carefully managed territory containing over 50,000 inhabited worlds. Industrial complexes that dwarfed anything in alien space, and technological capabilities that made their own achievements look like children's toys. "Impossible," whispered Counselor Thekvar of the Rigelian Unity. "We monitored your space for millennia. Our scouts, our probes, our long-range sensors, they would have detected development on this scale." "Your scouts detected exactly what they were supposed to detect," Dr. Hawking replied. "Every probe that entered human space was tracked from the moment it crossed our borders. Every sensor sweep was anticipated and managed. Every piece of intelligence you gathered was carefully curated to present a specific picture of human capabilities." The truth was that humanity had turned alien surveillance into the greatest intelligence operation in galactic history. Every alien probe had become an unwitting participant in a 3,000-year deception campaign that had convinced 12 major civilizations to commit their entire military strength to an operation that was doomed from conception. "But why?" demanded Commander Veltara, her warrior's pride finally breaking through the shock of defeat. "Why allow us to believe you were weak? Why permit us to plan your destruction? You could have revealed your true capabilities at any time and prevented this conflict entirely." Admiral Chen's expression grew serious for the first time since her arrival. "Because, Commander, we needed to know who we were dealing with. For 3,000 years, we've lived under a treaty that was essentially a very polite form of imprisonment. We were forbidden from expanding, exploring, or fully participating in galactic civilization. We accepted those terms because we understood that our species had a reputation for being difficult neighbors." She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed the aftermath of the recent battle. The question we needed answered was simple. Had the galaxy learned to live with our existence, or were you simply waiting for an opportunity to eliminate us entirely? Your decision to break the treaty and launch a war of extermination answered that question definitively. Dr. Hawking activated another display that showed the current positions of human fleets throughout the galaxy. The aliens were stunned to discover that human vessels were already present in every major star system, had been there for decades, and had been monitoring galactic civilization with the same thoroughness that the galaxy had supposedly been monitoring human space. "We know everything," Dr. Hawking continued. "Every military installation, every defensive capability, every technological advancement, every political alliance. We've been watching you watch us for 3 millennia, and we've used that time to become very, very good at being unnoticed when we choose to be." The implications were staggering. If humanity had been present throughout galactic space for decades or even centuries, then every military secret, every technological advancement, every political development had been observed and cataloged by a species that was now revealed to be far more advanced than any civilization the galaxy had ever seen. "What happens now?" asked Ambassador Zethkar, the question that everyone present desperately needed answered. Admiral Chen's smile returned, but it was the smile of someone who had just won a game that the other players didn't even know they were playing. "Now, we renegotiate our relationship. The Terran Isolation Treaty is indeed void, as you so helpfully declared. In its place, we propose the Galactic Coexistence Accords. The new treaty terms were projected into the chamber, and they were unlike anything in galactic legal history. Instead of restricting human expansion, the Accords restricted alien access to human space. Instead of limiting human technological development, they required alien civilizations to share their research with human scientists. Most importantly, instead of treating humanity as a contained threat, they established humanity as the galaxy's permanent peacekeeping force. "You're demanding tribute," accused General Crixon, his military mind finally grasping the true scope of humanity's victory. "We're offering protection," corrected Dr. Hawking. "The galaxy has spent 3,000 years learning to live without a dominant military power maintaining order. The result has been constant small conflicts, resource wars, territorial disputes, and gradually escalating tensions that led to this current crisis. Humanity is offering to provide the stability that has been missing. The choice presented to the alien civilizations was elegantly simple: accept human oversight of galactic affairs, or face the consequences of continued conflict with a species that had just demonstrated they could defeat the combined military might of 12 major powers without breaking stride. "And if we refuse?" Veltara asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Admiral Chen gestured to the tactical display, which now showed human fleets positioned throughout galactic space in formations that would allow them to reach any star system within hours. "Then you'll discover what happens when humanity stops choosing isolation and starts choosing expansion. The past 3,000 years have been our vacation from galactic politics. If you insist on making us active participants, you might find our participation more comprehensive than you anticipated." The vote, when it finally came, was unanimous. Every alien civilization represented in the Council chose to accept the Galactic Coexistence Accords, rather than face the alternative of continued conflict with humanity. 6 months later, Ambassador Zethkar found himself in an ironic position, serving as the alien liaison to the Terran Peacekeeping Authority, helping to implement the very accords that had resulted from his declaration of war. The galaxy had indeed learned to live with human existence, but on terms that humanity had dictated rather than accepted. Commander Veltara, meanwhile, had been assigned to study human military doctrine as part of her civilization's new cooperation requirements. She had expected to hate the work, but instead found herself fascinated by a species that had turned 3,000 years of imprisonment into the most sophisticated military preparation program in galactic history. "How did you know?" she asked Admiral Chen during one of their regular briefings. "How did you know that we would eventually break the treaty and give you the justification you needed to reshape galactic politics?" Chen's answer revealed the final layer of humanity's 3,000-year strategy. "We didn't know you would break the treaty, Commander. But we knew that if you did, we would be ready. And if you didn't, we would eventually be ready to break it ourselves. Either way, the isolation was always going to end. We simply chose to be prepared for every possible version of that ending." The galaxy had learned, far too late, that underestimating humanity wasn't just a tactical error, it was a fundamental misunderstanding of what 3,000 years of forced isolation could accomplish when applied to a species that refused to accept limitations as permanent conditions. And in the deepest classified archives of the Terran Federation, plans were already being drawn for the next phase of human expansion, not into galactic space, but into the vast, unexplored regions beyond the galaxy itself. After all, humanity had spent 3 millennia learning to think creatively about the contents of boxes. Now, they were ready to discover what lay outside the box entirely.